Molweni sanibonani. Today is a beautiful day. It's a culmination of a dream that was birthed in my spirit in 1998, which was 24 years ago, when I started writing as a form of self-therapy to self-soothe myself. 24 years later, I've published 5 books and more than 50 articles of content, which amounts to 500 pages. So for the first time in 2019, I did my first book launch at Bethesda Mission Methodist Church. And today is different because I'm doing the second edition of that book. And everything begins with prayer with me. So we had to launch in church. But this time around, we are at the beautiful Cotton Lounge and it's Youth Day. So my expectation is that young people are going to come out and they're going to be intellectually hungry to engage. And I look forward to that. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Thank you very much. Today is the 16th of June, 2022, a year that marks 46 years, a Youth Day in our country. I understand from the author that the date selection is quite deliberate, as you can imagine. It's important that days like these get commemorated. It's quite exciting, I must say, Uguti, in the year of 2022, we are able to celebrate authors, those that are young at heart, in establishments such as these, and not just in stuffy boardrooms wearing suits and being very formal, but rather taking conversations such as the ones we are going to have tonight in establishments where the young people and those of us that are young at heart can actually do enjoy. In keeping with the spirit of this month, we are at an establishment that is owned by a son of the soil to celebrate yet another son of the soil as he launches the second edition of his first book. Those who don't know the author, his name is Sihlangule Siwisa. He hails from the Eastern Cape. Inkaba yakhe iseDikeni, his ancestral home and roots are in Alice in the Eastern Cape. He's a proud Rhodes Scholar. He has published 5 books. In 2005, he gave us Africa Arise Asilelanga, which was followed in 2010 by Giant Steps. 5 years later, or 2 years later rather, we had the courage to begin again. Now, those first 3 books are very personal books, Zika Sihlangule, and if you want to know who he is and where he comes from, you will read those 3 books. There was a shift in 2015 when he wrote From Where I Stand. He started making the shift to social commentary. 4 years later, in 2019, he gave us Make All Voices Count. And today it is the launch of the second edition of that book. What is different from those that do have the original copy is that we now have 9 new chapters in Make All Voices Count. And the addition or the augmentation that's been done is to look at the kind of citizens that are required in a democracy like ours that is matured to the level that it has. It calls for every single one of us to play a part. We can't just sit back and fold our arms. We need to be active participants. So the new 9 chapters speak exactly to that. Now, to kickstart our program, which is a very brief program, which I've been told is going to be very interactive, We're going to use all platforms. There'll be music at some point. We're going to have videos that will be flighted. We'll also have conversations with the author, a discussion that will be highly informal, and just to sit around the fire, as it were, and conversate about some of these important aspects. Now, to kick things off, we are going to see a series of videos, Zika Sihlangule, where he's engaging us, or the audience rather, on a few matters that are very close to his heart, that directly link to the subject matter of Make All Voices Count. If you could pull out that video, please.
Register to vote. I will vote. As a young person, you've got a choice. You can either allow history to shape you, or you can shape history. Make your voice count. I'm showing up for good governance. I'm showing up for change. I'm showing up for social activism. Young people can play an active role in building the future of South Africa. First of all, by voting, because voting gives you a license to hold those in elected authority accountable for how they govern. But the second thing is that voting for me is not something that takes place once every 5 years. There needs to be an ongoing engagement where there's legislation that's going out that may or may not be in favor of what young people require. For instance, looking at the deployment of Wi-Fi. It's Wi-Fi in Pretoria. That is something that's truly, truly amazing. And those are the sort of projects that young people should continually be pushing the envelope to get government to do. Democracy is about having a theater of voices and acknowledging that as citizens of the country, there are no illegitimate voices amongst us. It's about finding space where we are led by the most sensible voices and not necessarily by the loudest voices. Former President Thabo Mbeki said, "I am prepared to defend at the top of my voice the right for you to differ with me at the top of yours." That is democracy. Voting, in my view, is an outward collective expression of an inward desire for freedom. It gives us as citizens the opportunity to choose the kind of leaders that we can hold accountable for how they govern. That means that we look at their conduct and we look at their competence, and together that determines whether they've got the integrity to enjoy our vote. The reason why I think most young people have stopped voting is that they've lost confidence in the elected authorities. Historically, we've had exceptional people who've been able, like Oliver Tambo, who stood up and he said, "Freedom in our lifetime," where the vision of the political party that led us was clear. But over time, there's been a gradual erosion of capacity to lead, and it starts at the top. And this is, when you contrast this with the lack of delivery, at a local government level, it leads to despondency, where young people say, what's the point of participating in a voting exercise when the people that we vote for are not sensitive to our needs and delivering to our needs. 94 specifically, I remember quite clearly, because it came at a time when there was CODESA 1, CODESA 2, and there was a transition between getting to a place of understanding on how the government of national unity will be framed. I was too young to vote, but I remember the long queues of people standing in the sun, ordinary South Africans, some of whom had never voted before.
Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the author of Make All Voices Count, Mr. Sihlangule Siwisa.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's true. My name is Sihlangule Siwisa, and I'm a speaker, a writer, and a storyteller. I took the time out of respect for my audience to prepare my thoughts, and so when you see me looking at my phone, I'm not on Insta, I'm actually looking at my notes. Thank you for coming tonight. I really, really appreciate it. I started writing as a form of self-therapy after I experienced clinical depression for the first time in 1998. 24 years later, I have published more than 500 pages of content in the form of 5 books and 50 articles. My first books, like Mbasa said, Africa Rise, Giant Steps, and The Courage to Begin Again, were largely autobiographical in nature because I was still young and I was trying to find my voice. Once I had found my voice, I developed an appetite to write about leadership and the political economy. As Basa has already told you, this is the second edition of Make All Voices Count. I wrote this book to inspire civic activism that transcends the party political space. So often in our country, continent, and the world, we fail to find consensus because we look at each other through an ideological lens. Consequently, we focus on that which we differ on rather than finding common ground. In this atmosphere of fear, people are afraid of agreeing with one another across the political spectrum. This even happens within political parties, where people fear taking policy decisions that differ from their faction leader for fear of being labeled as a dissident or a counter-revolutionary. As a result, our politicians identify themselves as party members first and South African citizens second, which I find very absurd because it means for as long as we focus on what's best for the party ahead of the country, we don't optimize what is best for South Africa, and in actual fact, we become disloyal citizens of our country. So that is the gist of what the book is about. We need to create space such as this where we are free to debate freely and differ amicably by pursuing ideas that benefit Africa first, South Africa second, and your chosen political party third. I feel so strongly about this that I released Make All Voices twice. When I launched the first edition in 2019, I spoke for 30 minutes in a 1-hour program and answered no questions. Then after selling more than 200 books and reflecting, I was like, nah, abakandiva kakhle. So I wrote 9 more chapters and released the second edition, which is being launched tonight. Now, if there's one thing that I've always envied musicians for, is that they can sit and watch music lovers enjoying the product of their craft together. This is why artists like Kanye West and Mbasa have listening sessions when they drop a new album. Well, guess what? Today, because it's Youth Day, I thought instead of speaking for half an hour, I'd speak for 3 minutes and host a 6-minute listening session. The song you're about to hear encapsulates in 6 minutes what I say in the book in 183 pages. It was produced by Gama and Buso Madondo. The title of the book is Undisputed, the January 8th mix, and it's available for free on SoundCloud. It was not a commercial exercise. I was trying to spread the message in rhyme. I called it Undisputed because, you see, while I was training, they were uncontested. When the speed is done, I'll be undisputed. One, two, three, four. Kudala ntule njongile njonga majone pepeteti sabanda badale baxoxisa indaba ndaba. 1, 2 kuzawuswansela umsinsile. 3, 4 kuzobhangiza ikhwenene. Zipigadism, 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 zum 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 zum. DJ, drop that beat.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the 8th wonder of the world. Okay, here we go. I'm talking greatness from cradle to cradle. Heart of a panda, mind of a cobra. Uncle Bay make you go, I papi. Leader of the 6th, colonel of the 8th. Part phoenix, part dragon, part lion. I got rhymes that make you K-Waka wonder. I'm a lyrical assassin, leave no bodies on the ground. Hello world, I'm in the mix. A bit of history. My mama's a princess and my daddy's a diplomat. Don't that make me a blue-blooded president? Okay, DJ Lees. Fagale bass putting my gel.
Zippy cattism, zippy cattism, zippy cattism, zoom, 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 zoom. Zippy cattism, zippy cattism, zippy cattism, zoom, 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 zoom.
From Umamo Albertina Sisulu, not at Walter Sisulu, to Ahmed Kathrada, Griffiths Mxenge and Charlotte Maxeke. Alwi Lamakawe, Azinkonde Sizo Sakowethu, Egushe incwadi, de anyanzeleka holisibham. Ngoku ke amabhube siyango 1952 nge-Defiance campaign aswela abalandeli emva kuka-76. Ilizwe ligcwele izibhovu-bhovu zozwilakhe nocwetha abaluma bevuthele. Azi uthini na uvuyisele mini? Azi uthini na uSolomon Mahlangu?
Zippy cattism, zippy cattism, zippy cattism, zoom, 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 zoom. Zippy cattism, zippy cattism, zippy cattism, zoom, 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 zoom.
A study of our history has shown me that history is a sum total of all of our stories. From the rise of Zulu nationalism to the Great Trek, from the heroism of Ndlela kaSompisi to the bloodthirsty deception of Dingane. Not all history is worthy of being celebrated, but all of our stories need to be told without cherry-picking what is palatable or what paints us in the correct light. What you appropriate out of history to edify your community becomes part of your heritage. So history is collective, but heritage is communal. Until we learn to differ well as Africans and rise above factional differences and petty party politicking, we will never be able to harmonize our disparate needs. And yet, we all claim to speak on behalf of the desperate and the downtrodden. Aibo. Konage. It's not that I don't appreciate how well Musi speaks, it's just that it's Izu Kumsha without the burden to lead. I'm aboard a 100-year train that's tilting on its side. NEC, send the signal, it's time to upgrade. Sabelela hlangangani singene sihlome sihlasele ncamalala yithi unshini simila sesizlethe. When did the axis of leadership shift from the people shall govern to we have a good story to tell? When last did we run a 10-year campaign that champions common nationhood, collective responsibility and individual accountability, ahead of what President Mbeki terms primitive accumulation and what I call soulless capital accumulation at the expense of true patriotism? But when I ponder the disciplined militants of fees must fall, my heart is filled once again with hope. Young lions, funded education by the state is a possibility if we invest in early childhood development and gradually reallocate the focus of the fiscus from social spending that creates legislated dependency to sustainable social change driven by education and social entrepreneurship. In order to achieve this, we have to defy the urge to become mediocre and aspire to become world-class. World-class problems cannot be defeated when mediocrity cuts a covenant with mediocrity and labels us as clever blacks when we rise in civic engagement. But when I ponder the disciplined disobedience of history exhibited by the Born Frees in 2015, I am persuaded to believe ukuba asilelanga khabe siguqe ngedolo. Chesa.
Zippy cattism, zippy cattism, zippy cattism, zoom, 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 zoom. Zippy cattism, zippy cattism, zippy cattism, zoom, 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 zoom.
We're no longer underground, we're serving above the rim. Slam dunk, hold on, break glass, shut it down. Shut it down. Shut it down.
the eighth movement, just usher it down.
How do you follow that? I thought that was a second song. Thank you very much. We've heard the song, Undisputed, and it's available on SoundCloud. Sihlangule? Yes, SoundCloud. Thank you. I had the opportunity of listening to this song a few times whilst I was preparing for this, and I invite you, every single one of you, to actually do listen to the 6 minutes of the rhyme. There's a lot of parallels between the song and the book. If you look at the themes that is explored in the book, and if you also listen to the verses of Undisputed, you begin to see the thought process that Sihlangule has gone through. And at this point in time, we are going to pause and actually open it up for discussion. We did say that tonight was going to be highly interactive. It's a chance for everyone to engage, ask questions, make comments, and the man of the hour is right here, and he will be engaging with us. So without wasting any time, I'm going to open it up and take a round of questions. We'll take 3 at a time and afford Sihlangule an opportunity to either comment or answer or have an engagement on whatever questions that have been raised. I don't know if there are any that I can take. I've noted you, Tlulu.
I just wanted to understand your perspective on democracy. So I've been thinking a lot, and I'm thinking that democracy is a very primitive concept, and yet we attained it yesterday in South Africa. You mentioned that there's complexities in South Africa and the democracy is very advanced. We have made little to no progress. I just really need to understand really where's your stance on the primitive aspect we have that's new to us? How do we deal with it?
If you listen to the videos, I know the sound was a bit soft. I said that democracy is an outward expression of an inner desire for freedom, right? And that's how I feel that it is. Hence I say make all voices count, because I believe each of us as voters or as future voters and citizens have a valid voice to add to what I call the theater of voices, right? But what I find interesting about democracy is that there are different types of democracy. I've noted that in Africa, or particularly developing countries, some of the best leaders are benevolent dictators. It's just the way we are structured, given where we come from in terms of our tribal history. We respect rural authority, royal authority. So we work well with commandist leaders. President Thabo Mbeki was accused of being a very commandist leader, but he did a lot for the country. Interestingly enough, President Mbeki said, I'm prepared to defend at the top of my voice the right for you to differ with me at the top of yours. But I think having attained democracy, what that does is it legitimizes each and every idea and each and every voice. But what I insist on is that we must not be led by democracy by noise. We must be led by the most sensible voices, but not necessarily the loudest.
You say by the leaders putting party first, they are being disloyal to South Africans. So I just want to ask the question, the president said there was a leak, an audio leak, and he said he'd rather die on a sword or die on or something like that than to tell the truth to the public. Is he being disloyal to South Africans?
Tlholo, your question is very interesting. President Thabo Mbeki had something that he normally would say when they ask him a difficult question. He would say, I think a better way of asking that question would be, and then he would answer his own question and not the one that was asked. Look, I think as an individual, there are things you say around a safe circle. There are things that I would confess to Liz were privately that are not meant for public consumption. So I think it was highly mischievous of the person who recorded the president without his knowledge, because we don't have the full context. So my answer is no, I don't think he's being disloyal, but I think there's a context that we were not privy to. And that's why he said what he said in the recording.
Do you feel that the voice of the boy child in today's current society, do you feel that it counts as much as the voice of a girl child? And do you feel that the boy child is actually considered, you know, in terms of democracy, politics, and policy making? Or are there enough platforms for him to be there? Because, you know, it's so sad that you look at the state of our country, and we need the boy child, we need his voice to say, I feel neglected in terms of empowerment, and. But then when he commits a crime, we are too quick as a society to call him names, we are too quick to judge him, we are too quick, you know, to disregard him. But when it comes to these opportunities, you know, do we consider him, you know, does his voice count?
With regards to the boy child, I'm very, very passionate. As you know, I contributed a letter to your book, Dear Son, which is a book that was published to try and encourage children who grow up without fathers or father figures in their lives. So it's a collection of letters from men who care. I myself am a father to a boy child. And I think it starts with you as a parent who's expecting a child with a sincere desire to have a healthy child, regardless of whether it's a girl or a boy. Now, in Africa and around the world, we hold a lot of significance around having a boy child because the boy carries the surname of the father, and so therefore continues in a patriarchal society to sustain the lineage of the family. But the irony is that amakhaya amangentombi sezichatile, and they go and they make sure within the little that they own as a family, they provide resources not only for their nuclear family, but for their family where they come from originally. So I think because of the rise of feminism, we've tended to try and encourage girl children, dinabachana who are girl children, who are activists, who are young activists, and I'm loving how they are germinating in that journey. But we must not leave behind the boy child, because those empowered daughters will need to find men who see women as equals, right? A lot of the times we quote the Bible and we subjugate the voice of women because we say submit. But the Bible says submit to your husband, not to all men, right? So as we grow the voices of our daughters and tell them they can become anything, we must also encourage boy children to respect girls. I don't know if you saw the advert where they were talking to young girls and they said, run like a girl. Right? There are so many negative expressions. Even I as a young boy would be offended if somebody says you think like a girl, or you run like a girl, or you talk like a girl, because we associate femininity with weakness, and that is not the case.
I'm quite a spiritual person, as you know, and my spirit had a question And I'm trying to frame the question in the context of your book of making all voices count. And it's quite also ironic that the lady was talking about a neglected voice. There is a voice of a white South African citizen that is not heard, in the sense that, if we're being truly honest with ourselves, the government is not delivering on certain things, and there could be reasons for that, but I think if we're being honest with ourselves, it's just not working. And as a result, you're seeing the white citizen either being more despondent than the black citizen one, to the extent that there's immigration that happens. In my, especially during the COVID and now, I've seen more immigrations than I've ever seen. Maybe it's because I'm now an adult and I now understand what immigration is. But there's been a hell of a lot more people, some people will say going back to where they come from or whatever but the point of the matter is they are seeing a system that's failing in their minds, and therefore they see a better life somewhere else. How do we address that voice and give it comfort? Because again, I think democracy and freedom is about finding a common ground, the commonalities that you spoke about, as opposed to the differences. Because if we're trying to build a world and a universe that is inclusive, it's all the colors. It doesn't help if I'm saying, Mabambe, they must go to where, because they are people as well. They have a spirit, they have a soul, they have something to contribute to this universe, as do we. So how do we, the question in short is, how do we make that voice of the despondent and the discouraged white South African count?
I think when it comes to the voice of the despondent white South African, the reality is when we achieved democracy, it led to civic liberties for the majority of black South Africans. But unlike what happened in Israel, when the Jews were persecuted by Hitler, where there was, instead of a truth commission, there was, a process of reparations. Germany had to pay money to the state of Israel and for Jewish people for what happened. Now in South Africa, we had reconciliation without reparation. And unfortunately, in the time that we've had up until now, the gap between the poor and those who have money, that despondent white South African is still privileged, and there were no reparations. And I think that's why the voice of the white South African is not heard, because the majority black South Africans feel that we are the ones who went out of their way as the wounded to seek reconciliation with our white South Africans. But from their side, there's been no reparations. So until we address that problem, there's always going to be a challenging of the validity of that voice, right? Having said that, I have witnessed white South Africans who call Africa their home. Yes, they came here, their forefathers came here with an idea of conquest, but they were not present at that time. So we cannot hold them accountable for what happened back then. But we must level the playing field. That way, all our voices will count. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe I've answered your questions. Oh, there's one more. That's the last question.
Congrats again, my brother. It's a pleasure to be in your presence. Over 5-time author. So I must be careful of how I ask my questions. I've got a couple of them, but I'll only just ask one. You speak about noise. On one hand, you speak about sensibility on the other. Can you briefly break down why you're emphasizing that issue of the loudness of voices? Because we need noise, generally, that's how we advocate for things, and there's a strategy around that, or should be. Then the sensibility on the other side, and I just briefly want you to just unpack that so that we have a clearer understanding, because it sounds like it's a theme of your book, that all voices count, but there's noise, particular kind of leadership noise that's unnecessary. Then there's a sensibility of leadership that you need to unpack.
Do you listen to the noise? What kind of noise is important?
Thank you so much. First of all, to clarify, yes, you listen to all the voices. The Bible says, listen also to the dull, because they too have their story, right? The difference is when it comes to noise, so often we see people rising to power on the basis of charisma and not content. Now, I'm a big believer in thought leadership. So that's why I'm saying we need to weigh the content of someone's voice versus the militancy with which they deliver that voice and the charisma that cloaks the lack of content. I hope I've answered your questions.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for lending your ears. Thank you for making the time. And thank you for allowing a conversation to flow. We've listened to Sihlangule. He has encouraged us to be active citizens. He's encouraged us to read the book, formulate our own thoughts, but I think at the crux of it is to ensure that we are not just passive recipients of what's happening to us. We need to be active, we need to engage, and we need to formulate and be part of the solution. So thank you very much, Sihlangule, for that. Truly appreciated, and congratulations on book number 5. There are a few people that we need to thank for tonight. The first ones are our gracious hosts, Cotton Lounge. Thank you very much to the owner of Cotton Lounge and his team. Give credit for a video that played earlier on to Anele and Khutazo from Generation Z. And they interviewed Sihlangule as part of We Are Democracy in 2019. We also, Sihlangule would like to thank Ugama Nombuso, who helped produce Undisputed, the song that we heard earlier on. We've got Usivu, who's our photographer. Thank you, Sivu. We've got O'Brien Nofarai, who are part of the audiovisual crew. Thank you very much. And also, or maybe finally, I need to thank, yes, the owner of Cotton Lounge, together with his team, Umandla, Nolebu, and Alan, for this evening. Thank you very much, ladies. It's not every day that we're able to gather and engage as family, as friends, and have meaningful conversations. So thank you very much for the time, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm just getting up to thank just a few people who are close to my heart. First of all, I want to thank my wife. She's not here right now. She's looking after our little cub. By the way, when I said activism, I was saying, where are my young lions? Because when I look around, I see a lot of hyenas parading around where young lions used to roar. So I want to thank my wife. My son's name, Gumalakiwe Ikamva Lunje Mvuselelo Mangaliso Siwisa. Malakiwe Ikamva means let's build the future. And it takes young people who are engaged citizens to build that future. I also want to thank Umbasa, who's my older sister, our deputy parent, and our MC for tonight. You really, really did the business. I want to thank my extended circle of siblings, Bakwa Siwisa na Kwangozwana, and our cousins. We call ourselves Team Too Strong. Yes, when I think of Teams Too Strong and my day ones, Utkulu, Zandilu, Elmarie, as I was getting in the shower, getting ready to come here, I had a song in my mind. It's a song by Fabulous featuring Neo, where he says, I'm a movement by myself, but I'm a force when we together. I'm good all by myself. You make me better,
So ladies and gentlemen, you as the audience make me better. Even when you ask me hostile questions, you give me homework. You give me homework to go out there and become better, because that's what we want. And then before I close, I just want to read a quote that was shared with me in the Gentlemen's Club. I'm a member of a Gentlemen's Club because trying to prioritize the voice of the boy child. The quote says, "We come from humble families, old houses, small towns with sad stories. We are not hustling to impress or to be in competition with anyone. We just want to change the storyline and fight battles our parents never won." Never let anyone make you believe that your voice is not valid and cannot make a difference. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Sihlangule Siwisa. I'm a speaker, I'm a writer, I'm a son of the soil. Thank you.